My name is Conor McKenna. How's your Saturday going? Perhaps you're listening to our podcast page at hockeyprimetime.com. In that case, whatever day it might be, I'm wishing you the best. It is a beautiful, beautiful, sunny summer day in Montreal. As we had a couple of it, I'm sure many of you on the East Coast have been dealing with it. Have been in a hot little stretch, and it's broken a little bit today. Just perfect weather here. Good Stanley Cup final weather, I'd wager. Maybe a little bit better than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, although it was a dry heat in Vegas over the last couple of days. But, geez, how do you follow up that? What went down there in Vegas the last couple of days? Lil Jon for game one. And what did they have? Imagine Dragons for game two, if you're into that type of thing. A lot of pomp and pageantry, and what a great hockey town it's turned into there in Vegas. You got the party outside and just all over the place, cheering for the greatest story I think that we've ever seen in hockey, and it's been a really good fight. Hasn't it been good, the final so far? It's a lot of fun, I think, for neutral fans. I was so happy to see that the ratings were as good as they were for game one in particular. You think about the NHL had to be hoping that maybe the Rockets would finish off the Warriors in 6 games in the NBA's Western Final, but it didn't happen. So they're going up against not only Game 7 in the NBA, the ratings juggernaut that is the NBA, but also, some of you may know, it was also the season premiere of The Bachelorette that night, which I don't happen to watch, but I like to keep up to date on current events. So those are, and that's a ratings juggernaut as well. So the NHL did really well ratings-wise for game one, and I think a big part of that was the stories here. People want to see this Vegas thing. It's that thing that people, and you know this probably, I'm sure some of you listening you're big hockey fans, and there's people in your life that are not such big hockey fans. And are they asking you, is this the story that they're asking about? How about this Vegas team? Where did they come from? To explain it to my girlfriend the other day, who does not, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to her or anything like that, just doesn't care about hockey, which I've got love for. That's fine. I don't need my girlfriend to be into hockey. But I was explaining to her that this time last year, this team did not exist. And she was amazed by this story as well. So anyway, welcome to the show. It's on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. We're also streaming live always at hockeyprimetime.com. You can watch the live stream. I'm sitting here in the Hockey Primetime studio. And I can see here I've got my bottle of Perrier here in the frame. Maybe I'll move that over here. I don't want to be giving free advertising to Perrier. And Laura's not here. The producer of the show is Laura Saba. She's the one who put together the show and booked the guests and is responsible for a lot of the content. But Laura is off this week and next, actually going on a nice little trip. So we're wishing Laura bon voyage and looking forward to having her back with us here in a couple of weeks. But I'm here, and we've got Rob Conway on the board at SiriusXM in Toronto. I'm here in Montreal, and you can watch the stream at Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Periscope, and other places if you want to see the magic happening. I will try to make it as entertaining as I possibly can for you. I did want to start, and I apologize because I already have sort of mentioned the NBA, but I want to mention it again because of what we saw happen this week. And one of the dominant stories in sports was J.R. Smith and what happened at the end of game one of the NBA Finals. It was one heck of a game, especially in regulation, just a really good game. And you may or may not be aware of what happened here. I'll just very quickly explain that J.R. Smith, who plays for the Cleveland Cavaliers, at the end of the game, basically, long story short, thought that his team was winning. He thought they had a 1-point lead when, in fact, everybody and their mom knew that the game was actually tied. So he gets the ball with 5 seconds left, and his lack of situational awareness leads him to basically dribble the ball out, thinking he can just run out the clock, maybe expecting to get fouled, but really sort of thinking that they were about to win the game, when, in fact, it was a tie game, and it ended up going overtime. And you've probably seen LeBron James's reaction of just absolute, I don't even know if disgust is the right word, but anyway, LeBron was not happy with his teammate. Why would he be? He played his heart out and then had that happen. And who knows, maybe they wouldn't have won the game, but still, they didn't give themselves a chance to win the game in regulation, which they should have done. They should have had a shot to end the game. And after the game, J.R. Smith had the audacity. The guy who screwed up had the audacity to claim that he actually did it on purpose. He said, even though we could see, based on my lip reading skills and based on what a lot of people said, and based on common sense, he clearly did think that that his team was winning. But after the game, he claimed that he did not. That he tried to sort of come out and say, no, I did that on purpose. I meant to do that. And I did know what was going on when common sense would dictate otherwise. He really did. He tried to talk his way out of it, which was hilarious. But also, it made me think, and I was thinking about this, and I heard Ray Ferraro talking about this with Darren Dreger in a piece on tsn.ca. They're doing a Stanley Cup conversations piece with those guys who have to be having a great time covering this series. And I found myself sort of thinking about hockey, and I realized that basketball is a little bit different. They're just different games, I understand. But what would happen in the same situation? Would a hockey player, what would he say? Would any hockey player have the audacity to come out and claim that in fact it was not his lack of situational awareness, that he meant to do this? And I think not. And I'm not sure how the teammates would handle it. I expect that for the most part, the teammates would really sort of go to bat for the guy, talk about what a great guy he is, what a great player he is, what a great teammate he is, and all the rest of that, and all those nice things that these guys do. But it reminded me a little bit of the personality and culture of the NBA and how different it is from hockey. And I think some people will tell you, especially the old-fashioned types, will tell you that that's a good thing. They don't want personality, and they don't want personalities in hockey. I don't feel that way at all, and I'm a big fan of the association, although not nearly as much and not nearly as involved in watching and covering it as I am the National Hockey League. But the thing that makes basketball so great, and I really do believe this, the reason that their ratings are so good, I mean, they get a lot of people watching their sport, they get a lot of people talking about their sport, and ESPN, and we know, is obsessed with the NBA, right? Especially if LeBron James is involved, it pushes clicks. That's what people want to hear people talking about on the radio in the United States for the most part. And it's hard, right? And I think a lot of you hockey fans out there, there's a reason you're listening to the show on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, and it's because you can't really get good hockey talk on your local sports radio station. I know a lot of American markets are very zoned in on everything but hockey, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, or whatever. But I think that hockey could be more popular, and I think it's always in some ways going to be a little bit of a fringe sport, and there's a number of reasons for that, and access is one of them, right? It's hard, if you're a hockey parent, if you're a person who plays hockey even now, it's expensive to play hockey, it's expensive to get ice time, it's time consuming to get out there. If you want your kid to get there at an elite level, there's going to be a lot of early mornings on weekends and otherwise, and a lot of commitment on your part financially and personally. And it's hard. It's hard to get into hockey. I understand that. And when you're Canadian, it's just a way of life. But it's hard. But I still think hockey could be more popular if we let players' personalities shine through a little bit more. What I mean by that is, and I know you've heard this before, and I don't want to sound like a broken record or a cliche, but the idea that we want these guys to show more personality, these guys they're so boring. Why is it that hockey players are so hesitant to speak their mind and yada, yada, yada? And then the second one of them does it, and we all know this, right? The second a hockey player shows a little personality and sticks their neck out and says something or other, there's at least a segment of fans and media that react negatively and say, I don't want to hear that. I don't like that at all. And then they'll go back a week later to saying, I want to hear more from players. But it's like a have your cake and eat it too situation. Like, it's great to see these guys showing personality. And this week, did you see Connor McDavid? Connor McDavid, who is arguably the best player in hockey, one of the big stars of the game. And he's a guy that we don't know much about him, right? And I think what we saw from him this week was after the World Hockey Championship, he decided to stay over, and I could be wrong about this, but I do know that he is in Europe. I presume that he stayed over there after the Worlds and decided to attend the French Open and ended up on a TV broadcast, laughing, talking about playing ping pong against a young Canadian tennis star, Denis Shapovalov, and he says he beat him in ping pong. They're laughing. He's posting stuff on Instagram. He's such a young guy, right? You think about it, and what is he, 21 years old, has his whole life ahead of him, and still sort of growing into himself as an adult. But I think it's been really cool to see that, and I would love to see more of that. Just overall, you think about the stuff that's going on in the NBA as well, right? You've got the finals going on there. Did you hear the story about Brian Colangelo, the general manager of one of the teams, and allegedly having 5 separate burner Twitter accounts devoted to not only defending himself against those who would presume to criticize him, but also doing crazy stuff like second guessing or undermining coaching decisions that his own coaches were making on Twitter with a fake Twitter account, or criticizing his players, revealing sensitive information about players on his team. Just totally bananas. And I'm not saying I necessarily want to see that in hockey. And I think, and maybe that's a good way of summing it up, is that in hockey, for sure, general managers have burner Twitter accounts. 100% they do. And they're monitoring this and that and keeping an eye on what people are saying, not just about them, but about their team and about the league. And it's a great way. You know this. Everybody knows this. Twitter is a great way of staying up to date on what's going on in the NHL. But NHL GMs with their burner accounts, they don't use them to tweet. And I'm not saying that they should, but it is a sort of a good little microcosm of hockey versus basketball, right? The GM of an NBA team will use his burner account to do a whole bunch of crazy stuff. The NHL guy will just use it. He'll just watch and keep an eye on what's being said and what's going on social media. I think, conformity, and I know this is something we've talked about here on the show before, but conformity is what hockey people want. Hockey people, hockey men, and the old school, the Don Cherries of the world, right? With his montage, oh, look at these guys in their suits. And what did you see happen the other day? Like, he looked ridiculous, but LeBron James walked into Oracle Arena for game 1 of the finals. Dude's wearing a suit with shorts, like an actual suit, and he's wearing shorts. Like, he looked ridiculous, but it was hilarious. And it's another example, like an NHL player, not only would he never do that, I don't even think you're allowed to do that, right? There's a dress code. And that's the type of thing I believe holds the sport back a little bit, especially in 2018 with the kind of access we have. We want to know who these guys are, what kind of personalities they have. These are funny guys. They're smart guys. They're terrific guys. And it would be great to know a little bit more about them. Give me a little bit more of the Jonathan Marchessault Lamborghini with the Vegas Golden Knights logo on it. You've seen that, right? He'll pull up to the rink in his Lambo with a Knights logo on the hood, and it's great. Alex Ovechkin, he's got a little bit of personality, and it's something that he has been criticized for in the past, right? It's almost like having a smile on your face is considered a bad thing by some people in the hockey world, and I think that's a shame. So anyway, that's my rant about that. I think that I expect that what's going to happen in the years to come is we're going to see more of it, and I think people will be more accepting of it. But especially with younger fans, and many younger fans are gravitating to things like watching people play video games instead of watching actual live sports. If you want to draw in the young fans, I think personalities are a huge part of that. But it's going to be fascinating to see what these all these millennials end up doing, and are some of them going to start watching sports? Are they going to become season ticket holders of sports teams? It remains to be seen, although it seems unlikely at this point, unless something drastic changes. But access, personalities, and selling those personalities, man, that's what it's all about. The NBA is a star-driven league. Even if you're not a basketball fan, you know about LeBron James. You're at the very least, you're probably aware of Steph Curry, and that Kevin Durant did this crazy heel turn and joined the Warriors all those years ago. And I think that the reason for that is that they really do market those personalities, and players aren't afraid to show those personalities off, whether it's on social media or in interviews or otherwise. And I'd love to see a little bit more of that in hockey, because the personalities in the game are just as good in the NHL. It's just people, I think, are a little bit they're hesitant to show that off because of hockey culture. So that's all I have to say about that. How's your Saturday going? It's a beautiful day. We're about 2.5 hours, let's be honest here, actually, probably 3.5 hours away from puck drop for Game 3. I wonder if Washington will drag out their pregame ceremony until like 8:30, the way that Vegas did in Game 1. That was crazy. It was fun. For me, it was a little bit much. That's something else I'd like to see in hockey. Let's show a little bit more personality. And how about this? Why don't we, like baseball, like football, like soccer, go out and start the game when they say they're going to start the game. If you want to do some crazy big thing before the game, go ahead, do it. Just do it earlier. Don't start doing it when you said the game was going to start, and then start the game at 8:28. I don't have any problem with the ceremonies or any of that stuff. I just wish that the games would start when they say they're going to start. It's like you never really know when the hockey game's going to start, right? Is it going to be 7:15? Oh, 7:22, 8:15, 8:22. Oh, 8:28 was, I think, the start time there on Monday night. Let's just like find a start time and stick to it. Coming up next, let's talk to a two-time Stanley Cup champion, a broadcaster and motivational speaker. His name is Bill Clement. You know him. He was one of the guys from the NHL on ESPN, and he's still working in broadcasting on the Flyers and more. He's got a new book coming out. We'll talk to Bill on the other side. We got a busy show ahead. Very excited to talk to all these guys. We'll go to the NHL Draft Combine in this hour. We'll dive in deep on the Stanley Cup Final in the next hour. Plenty of excellent, very millennial-friendly content coming your way in the next hour and 45 minutes or so. So Bill Clement, though, is coming up next year. This is Hockey Primetime. Live to Verizon Center. I think I got that right, where the Capitals will be playing. We'll be going there at 7 o'clock. We will have a live and a special Game 3 pregame show for you here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio between 7 and 8 o'clock. And then we will take you, I believe, to Capitals 24/7, the Washington Capitals radio network call of the Capitals and the Vegas Golden Knights. It still feels weird saying that out loud. In the Stanley Cup Final. Our next guest knows a thing or two about winning the Stanley Cup. He is a two-time Stanley Cup champ. He's a broadcaster, author, and motivational speaker. A new audiobook out right now called Everyday Leadership. You can get it at audible.com. More on that in a moment. Bill Clement, welcome back to the show. How you doing, man?
Hey, Connor, doing great. Thanks. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for making time for us here today, and congrats on the new book. Is it not? And again, we'll get to that in a moment. But just the fact that Vegas is doing this, that they're in the Stanley Cup Final, they're tied at a game apiece, they're very much in this thing. Does it feel surreal at all to you that this is happening with an expansion team?
Yes, I heard you say that during the introduction. It still feels funny saying that. I guess we should be used to it by now, but this franchise started the season And I think, like everybody else, I just kept waiting for them to fail. You know, at some point they were having such a good season. Well, I guess the common mentality, and it was one that I shared, was, well, it's not going to go on that long, right? I mean, wait till November, then wait till December, wait till January. And every time they lost a couple of games and we thought, okay, here it comes, it never happened. And even when the playoffs began, it's like, oh, wait a minute now, this is going to get a little tricky for the Vegas Golden Knights. And they went 12-3 in their first 3 playoff rounds. So I'm completely on board. I'm a complete believer, and I do know that they can win the Stanley Cup. But at the same time, I know that Washington can win the Stanley Cup, and that's why this series is really compelling.
No kidding. And it's been great. It's great for the game, isn't it? Overall, it's the ratings were good in game 1. For me, it's like anything that makes hockey more accessible to people is something I'm in favor of. And this really does feel like it's the type of thing that gets the casual fan to tune in, to maybe choose to watch the Stanley Cup final when there's so many other entertainment options available. It's a nice thing for the sport, isn't it?
It's great for the sport. For anybody that watched the opening of Game 1 in Vegas, and I got to call a game there. I did a Flyers game there this season, and it's kind of, when you're in the building, it's as if Cirque du Soleil has come and introduced itself to the National Hockey League, because that's what the in-arena production is like, from Michael Buffer to all of the other things that they do as part of the opening to every game, including the ones in the Stanley Cup final. Just magnificent. And I think it's easy for a casual fan or a non-fan to be captivated by the scene, by the story, by the underdog. Although, you know, after the record that Vegas put up, it's hard to call them an underdog, but people want to cheer for this new kid on the block. And what makes this series, I think, even more attractive is the story of Alex Ovechkin finally making it to the Stanley Cup final after being the most prolific scorer of this generation and of multiple generations. So there's a lot to like from a casual fan standpoint, or a cultivation of a non-fan. I think it's fantastic for the sport.
We're talking to Bill Clement here on Hockey Primetime. His new book is called Everyday Leadership, available at audible.com, facebook.com/BillClement10 as well. Let me ask you about the book. Bill, tell me, what is Everyday Leadership about?
Well, the concept of everyday leadership, it kind of unfolded as to recover from complete financial ruin after my career. I retired after 11 years in the NHL, and I got into the restaurant franchising business and acquired the rights for Georgia and Tennessee and Alabama for a restaurant franchise from Canada, and a lot still exists. They're Grandma Lee's. And I lost not only everything that I had, but I lost a lot of other people's money. And making the phone calls to the investors, telling them that it was all gone, was the hardest thing I had to do in my life. So I had to try to figure out what it would take to be successful. I mean, I was successful in the sport of hockey, but when people ask me, how did you choose hockey? The answer for me is easy. I didn't. It chose me, right? I grew up 2 blocks from Guy Lafleur in a little paper mill town called Thurso, Quebec, and went to a wee little school, and before I knew it, I was playing in the NHL. So when I was trying to figure out what success was really all about, I thought back to so many of the players that I played with that had just a great influence on the teams that they played on, and they didn't wear a C or they didn't wear an A. So the concept of everyday leadership is the notion that we are all capable of influencing other people, influencing their moods, their attitudes, their behaviors, their contributions, whether we have a rank, whether we have a title, whether we wear a C, or whether we wear an A. And that concept I've taken to, wow, I don't know how many thousands of people with audiences that I've spoken to over the last 25 years, but it's something I feel really passionate about, and I want to share with people the concept and really tell them my story. The book is autobiographical, but it's loaded with life lessons, and it's loaded with pretty accurate accounts of my failures, not only in the restaurant business, But I recognize that, wow, people look at me, they see me maybe on TV, they see me speaking, they know that I've won 2 Stanley Cups, played in 2 All-Star games, played in the NHL for 11 years. They think, wow, this guy was just made for success. I think I was just made for failure as much as I was for success. And that's the story that I try to tell, and the tools, the lessons, some of the how-tos to dig yourself out when you're completely covered up. That's sort of the genesis of everyday leadership and of the book.
When I say the word leadership, when you hear the word leadership, who's the first person that comes to mind from your life?
Bob Clark. Who was Bobby Clark, our captain in Philadelphia, was like no other man that I'd ever met. He was only a year older than I was, so I won our first cup. I was 23 when we won our first cup in Philly, and Bobby Clark was 24. But not only did he lead by example with his work ethic, and he was ruthless on the ice, but he was also very gifted. He put up numbers. But he was able to do something that I think is the most difficult thing for anybody in a leadership position to do, and that is have the tough conversation. That's sitting somebody down and looking them right in the eyes and saying, you're not giving us what you can give us, and you can give us more. Why aren't you giving us as much as you can? And Bobby knew when to pull people by helping them feel like they were vital to the outcome. He knew when to pull vigorously when his window of time was very small, and he would confront his own teammates and say, what was that? What was that effort in that game last night? We can't win if you play like that. So those are the tough conversations that he was able to have. And to this day, at all levels of business, in the business world, those are still some of the toughest things for people that have lofty job titles. They're C-suite, CEOs, CFOs. It's really difficult for people to have those honest, tough conversations.
And I know part of, and I heard an excerpt from the book, the audio book, which you can find. It's called Everyday Leadership. The author is Bill Clement, arguably the second most famous hockey player ever to come out of Thurso, Quebec, 2-time Stanley Cup champion, a broadcaster, author, and motivational speaker. You can download it at audible.com. It's also available on his Facebook page, facebook.com/BillClement10, number 10. In 1974, that Stanley Cup championship, and one of the things you talk about in the excerpt that I heard was the fact that the Bruins in 1974, the team that you guys defeated to win the Stanley Cup, perhaps maybe even on paper were a better team, and there was the mental hurdle of having had so much difficulty winning in their building that you guys were able to overcome. How was it that you guys were able to overcome that back in 74?
Well, we hadn't won there in 7 years. In 31 games, we had not won, and they had home ice. So, needless to say, it was a major factor in us being painted as huge underdogs, which we were in that series. But there was something that happened after we lost Game 1 dramatically with less than a minute to go, with 22 seconds to go. The game was tied, and we would have taken overtime, to score that one goal, a magical goal, and get our win. And Bobby Orr scored to beat us with 22 seconds to go in Game 1. And that was pretty traumatic. But our coach, who was one of the most influential men in all of our lives because he was so dynamic, Fred Shiro, after the game, we had a day off the next day. He said, okay, guys, I'm going to give you a choice for tomorrow. He said, you can all go down to Boston Garden and practice for an hour. And we were staying in a hotel outside of Boston that was built on a golf course. He said, or you can play 9 holes of golf and turn your scorecards into me. And we always, Freddie always threw things in at the tail end, like, and turn your scorecards into me. We realized a couple of years later that it was so that we had proof that we just weren't sitting in a tavern drinking beer all afternoon on the off day. So we golfed. We voted to golf and had a great time. And we won Game 2 dramatically, tying it up in the last minute and then winning in overtime, early in overtime. Bobby Clark scored. And it wasn't until years later that I realized what a chance Fred Shiro had taken with his career. I mean, this is a major sports league final series, and the coach lets his team golf on an off day when they really needed to win Game 2. I had a chance to ask Freddie what that was about. He passed away from lung cancer in 1990, and we all got a chance to spend a little time individually with him. And I said, Freddie, I got to ask you, what the hell were you thinking when you let us golf in Boston that day? I said, weren't you afraid of what could happen to your career? And he said, well, the thought did cross my mind. But he said, I'd never coached a group of guys like you. I'd never coached a group that was as tightly knit, that loved one another, that cared about one another. And he said, I wanted you to enjoy one another on that off day. I wanted you to laugh. I wanted the bond that we had, that I think was closer than the bond that the Bruins had for one another. He said, I wanted that to be as strong as it could be going into game 2. And I was never so impressed when I realized what a chance he took. And that's part of what leadership is about, is jeopardizing your own job security for a principle or an ideal or something that you know is going to potentially benefit the group. And that was Freddie Shero. I give him so much credit for us beating the Boston Bruins.
A legend, a Hockey Hall of Famer, a win together today, and we walk together forever. Fred Shero. Bill Clement, thanks for your time, man. I really do appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and I hope we can talk to you again soon.
That'd be great, Connor. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. That's Bill Clement. You can check out his website, billclementspeaking.com, and you can find his latest, his audiobook called Everyday Leadership, with more stories from a great NHL career and his path there and beyond. Always a pleasure to check in with Bill. Last time I saw him, must have been roughly this time last year. So bad with time, but to Chickies and Pete's in South Philadelphia, not a bad place to be before a hockey game. And once we were done with the show, I put away a lot of crab legs. I think I might have eaten enough crab legs for like 4 people. Hey, when in Rome, right? Coming up next, speaking of food that is good, he has an appreciation for it as I do. His name is Corey Masisak from The Athletic. He is in Buffalo covering the NHL's scouting combine. We will check in with Corey Masisak next, find out what's going down at the combine. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
No, it's 4 minutes, but yeah, we'll get out of it. Yeah.
And those blazing a new path in hip-hop.
Hey, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime. My name's Conor McKenna. Hope you're enjoying your weekend so far. A couple of hours to go until game time. A reminder that we will go live to Verizon Center for a pregame show special, Sirius XM NHL Network Radio pregame show live, starting at 7 o'clock, running until we turn it over to live coverage of the game itself, which we'll have for you here. The Washington Capitals and the Vegas Golden Knights, you know this. The series is tied up at a game apiece. So it feels like a pretty big game. It's weird, that home record for the Capitals and not nearly the dominant home team that Vegas has been in the playoffs so far. And, they've got Braden Holtby to thank perhaps for that heroic, that ridiculous, that insane save that he made in the late stages of game number 2. We were hoping to touch base with Corey Masisak of The Athletic, who I know is in Buffalo for the NHL Draft Combine, but a little bit of trouble touching base with him. So, in the meantime, let's zone in a little bit on the Stanley Cup final. We've got some audio from some of the key players involved, starting with head coach Barry Trotz. Here he is with his thoughts ahead of Game 3.
More important for us to play our game.
Sorry, this was a thing, but the number was wrong, so... after this, we'll get Corey on. Sorry, did you hear me?
Sorry, we have him?
Works well for us.
On the right side, second.
Sorry, do you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
No, so, sorry, I had Clement up. But, so Laura just sent me the number. It was 7-1 instead of 9-1. But I'll call him now, and we'll get him on. 1 sec.
Okay.
You play your system in the D zone, but make sure you're talking, communicating, and do the best you can.
On the left side, Gary.
Gerard, Gary Lawless, Vegas Golden Knights. Both Marchessault and Bellemare in the dressing room just recently said that turning the puck over has been sort of one of the factors in you not playing your game so far. And obviously they play a 1-3-1. What do you want from your group coming out of your own zone tonight?
Well, I just want us to play fast, play a quick game, and I think the biggest problem we had is we're in the offensive zone and turning pucks over down there. We're throwing pucks to the net, and we're not getting pucks to the net. And they're taking the puck from the offensive zone, and their D joining the rush, and they got a 4-man attack. So that's one of the biggest reasons. It's not really turning the puck over in the neutral zone; it's more or less in the offensive zone. We got to.
Okay, so I got him now. After this answer, I'll drop out of it. Okay.
Lineup changes tonight.
You'll see it warm up.
Yes, KG as always. If there are lineup changes, Barry Trotz is not going to tell you. Hasn't he been a little bit different in these playoffs? It seems like kind of like the way the Vegas Golden Knights are playing with house money a little bit. It doesn't have that contract and appears to be pretty loose. And I think that's translating on the ice. More on that in the latter stages of this hour of the show. But time for us to go to Buffalo. No better place to be on a Saturday night. It's the NHL's Draft Scouting Combine, and covering it right now for The Athletic. You can get NHL coverage at theathletic.com for a very reasonable price. His name is Corey Masisak. He's on the line right now. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. And apologies for the delay there in getting in touch with you. I'm glad that we have you now. What's your day like at the Draft Combine? Take me through it, if you will.
Well, I got here on Wednesday, and basically every day up until Friday, most of the reporters basically sit in the lobby of the Marriott next to the arena and next to the Harbor Center. And it's, you're basically just waiting for people to kind of walk by or walk through. It's pretty similar to covering like a GM's meetings or an owner's meetings, where you're just sort of, there's a lot of sitting around and waiting, and then maybe some talking to some people. But it's pretty good for, I've only been covering the team for a few months, so just getting to know some people, getting to talk to some agents about some of the players on the team, on the Devils, and then the past 2 days has been more, it's more draft centric. Like today, for instance, you get to the rink to the Harbor Center, the practice rink next to the main arena at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's pretty much all day just watching guys to go through their battery of tests and then doing interviews with them afterwards. So once the first group goes through, you're pretty much just doing interviews for about 6 hours with maybe a little bit of a lunch break in between. Any interesting personalities as far as the players, the prospects? Have you come across anybody who stood out? Yeah, there was a few. Akil Thomas seemed like a pretty personable kid. Tyler Madden, who is John Madden's son, not to make anybody feel old, but him talking about being in the room when John Madden won. Actually, I should take it back. The fact that he is too young to remember remember a whole lot from his dad winning with the Devils. Crazy. But he does remember a lot from whenever he won with the Blackhawks. It's kind of crazy. He was really interesting to talk to. There's a big Finnish kid named Sempo Ranta who was pretty engaging. There was a lot. I mean, you have your kids who don't have a whole lot to say, but generally speaking, I think they're all the best ones. Like, they've all been coached up on what to say about like the hockey stuff. So to me, the best personalities are the ones that have the best stuff to say about non-hockey stuff. So right. And I know, I mean, and I know you spent time covering football at the NFL draft combine. It can be very significant, whether fair or not, right? There's certain things that can happen at the combine that can have a significant effect on players' stock rising or falling. The NHL draft combine, not really like that, right? No, I mean, from what, I don't think anybody testing wise, did anything today. Like, no, yeah, right? Like, there's no, who was the famous guy from the Philadelphia Eagles? Oh, Mike Mamula, who supposedly wasn't even a first or second round pick, and then had a crazy combine and then became like the 9th pick in the NFL draft. There's not anything like that in the NHL, I don't think. I mean, there was one kid, Liam Foudy, who had the furthest long jump, the highest vertical leap, and was like second or third in the shuttle drill, and was in the top 5 in bench press. Like, he's just, his dad played in the CFL. His mom was an Olympic sprinter. He's just an incredible athlete. I don't think just because he was kind of if you would call it the dominant athlete of this event, that necessarily means he's going to be like a high pick or anything. I think he's still considered kind of a mid-round prospect, but it was just interesting to see. I mean, that's, they don't do anything on the ice. So, some guys might be great athletes on the ice, but not off the ice. But apparently Foudy is, maybe the fastest guy in this draft on skates too. So. Is there, did anybody fail to do a single pull-up the way who was it? Sam Bennett did a couple of years ago? Yeah, no, from what I saw, I didn't see anybody. And in fact, I don't think they were sort of flashing numbers on the scoreboard as it went along there. I don't think I saw anybody with less than 3, actually. I think it was all I saw lots of 4s, 5s, and 6s mostly. I think the most somebody did was like 15 or 16. But, wow. So that's more than I can do. All right, we're talking to Corey Masisak of The Athletic, covering the NHL draft combine from The Athletic New York on the New Jersey Devils beat during the regular season and the playoffs while the Devils were alive. How much do you have any kind of a sense as to how much I'm sure aware of this story that Jeff Merrick let go on the 31 Thoughts podcast a couple of weeks ago about an unnamed top prospect for a Canadian team who apparently is suffering from a debilitating video game condition that has put his career in jeopardy. Now, not even necessarily specifically about that, but do you know, or do you have any kind of a sense as to what extent teams are sort of having to adapt how they evaluate players? Is that the type of thing that might come up in an interview with a player ahead of the draft? Well, let's put it this way. whenever we came on, I was going to make a joke about Fortnite.
Yeah.
I was going to say something like, "Hey, how are you? I'm just got done playing some Fortnite," or whatever. Like this is going to be remembered as the Fortnite Combine. Like, I think if they this is my first one, but if they all have like kind of individual personalities, like this one will be remembered. Like it's been amazing. I mean, I probably talked to, I don't know, 20 kids today. There were how many ever, 60 or 70 of them that talked, like, and everybody, I mean, the first few guys that talked about, several of them said, what's the weirdest question that you got? And someone said, well, they asked me how much I play Fortnite. Or then one guy said, they asked me if I'm somebody who hides in the bushes in Fortnite, which I actually thought was a pretty good question. Like just the answers that you can get from that are actually pretty creative and interesting. Like that to me, that was like a kind of an off the wall thing. But then you realized after the fifth or sixth guy, it was like, no, wait, they're not necessarily looking to see if, how you play. They're looking to see if, that this is going to be a problem for anybody. And so it really has, I was talking about it with a few of the other writers who were trying to think of like something else that's sort of, it feels like something that's very recent. Like teams are very recently now suddenly saying, oh my God, what do we do about this? And this is sort of the reaction. Like teams are sort of scrambling to figure out if this thing is really going to be a problem from, maybe I had listened to Jeff and Elliot's podcast, and they're right. There's got to be more than one kid out there who this is a problem for. So, I think it's sort of I don't know if you want to call it a trend or a theme, or it's definitely something that concerns the 31 teams out there for sure.
I'd be so fascinated to hear like somebody like a real stodgy old hockey guy like Lou Lamoriello, like what his thoughts are about this, or to be in the room as somebody's explaining this phenomenon to Lou Lamoriello, because it's just because hockey is so. You know how hockey is as far as sports go, and I'm sure that this is an issue that's going to exist in all sports, but excuse me, but it is, I don't know, it's a very interesting, unique, and fascinating story. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years when it comes to this.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I think my question would have been, what's your favorite dance? Like, what's your favorite Fortnite celebration dance? But no, you know what? It's weird that like this is like the one video game that has sort of, obviously it's like just dominating everything in video games for people under the age of whatever, 25 or 21. But like,
got a break.
When I was covering the Capitals and lived in Virginia, I knew somebody who played Call of Duty, not a hockey person, just this was like a friend of mine basically who played Call of Duty online for hours and hours at a time, and it was like affecting his life. So it happens to people, like I kind of feel like Call of Duty was like sort of the precursor to Fortnite. Like totally. They just sort of figured out a way to take that gameplay and sort of package it in a way to just basically consume everyone.
Yeah, it is, and this is the first time that I really, when it comes to video games, start to feel old. Like, I have a PS4, I play video games, like, and I don't even really get the Fortnite thing. Like, I just haven't played it. So I got to get my life together, start get to my priorities straight. Corey, thank you for your time, man. I appreciate it, and I hope we can talk to you again soon.
Yeah, sure. Anytime. Always enjoy it.
Cheers. That's Corey Masisak from The Athletic, New York City, covering the draft combine. I wish we had a little more time. I wanted to ask him what's on the menu tonight. What's the food scene like there in Buffalo? I've never been. Got to get down there at some point. It sounds like it's a lot of fun, especially this time of the year. Maybe not so much in like February, right? Coming up next, what's the story behind the Capitals' home ice difficulties? I've got a theory. I'll tell you what it is next as we wrap up the first hour of the show. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live right here at hockeyprimetime.com. we'll have a special show for you before Game 3 of the Cup Final tonight. Front center and puck drop probably at 8:15 or so. So live coverage along of 3. This wins this game will win the series. What do you say? I mean, it could be true, and if it isn't, please don't blame me. What's with the Washington Capitals? Difficult. I think the record is 5 on home, and we know, right? Think for first round, and it feels like a lifetime ago that the Caps dropped the first 2 games at home against the Columbus Blue Jackets. They roared back and won 4 in a row and took the series, but they've had some trouble at home. And my theory, I do have a theory. You know, I always have a theory about everything. And my theory about this, and this may not be necessarily the first time you've heard this, and I apologize if it isn't. I know I'm not alone in thinking this, but I think that the pressure is different in Washington. And I think a lot of fan bases can probably relate to it. But isn't there that feeling in Washington, given the way that not only the Caps, but that market has been traumatized in the playoffs the last couple of years? The Nationals always disappoint. The Wizards are just flat out terrible. Well, whatever. They're okay. They're mediocre. And their football team is bad, right? They're expecting something bad to happen. And I think that nervous energy seeps into what you see happen there on the ice. You're waiting for something bad to happen. You're almost expecting something bad to happen when you're watching the Capitals play a playoff game, or any Washington team play a playoff game. So we'll see how that plays out tonight, and maybe that's a bunch of baloney. It's definitely possible. Coming up next, we're going to go dive in deep on the Stanley Cup Final. We've got Jesse Granger of the Las Vegas Sun from the Golden Knights perspective. We'll get the Capitals perspective from Isabelle Khurshudyan of the Washington Post. All that and more coming up in the next hour of the show. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Hey, welcome back. This is Hockey Prime Time. My name is Conor McKenna. Nice to be with you on this lovely, lovely Saturday evening. Wherever you are, we're about 2 hours away from game time, Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. Here's the rundown. If you're listening to us right now on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, you can keep listening to us, and we will bring you the CBS, I believe it's CBS Sports Radio National call from Kenny Albert, Ray Ferraro, and others on that call. That's going to be here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. If you want the Capitals call, you can zip on over to Sirius XM 167, the Vegas call at XM 219 and Sirius 217. So we've got you covered, whatever you're into. If you can't get in front of the screen, you can listen to the game on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and beyond. If you're a subscriber, I'm looking forward to this one. Definitely one to look forward to, and some big things happening. We've learned, and we talked in the last hour a little bit about the draft combine and some of the information that just came out. A bunch of the kids are going to go to Game 4 Monday night in Washington. Some of the top guys, including top pick, at least, barring a miracle or something really, really crazy. Rasmus Dahlin's going to be there. Andrei Svechnikov headed to Washington. Brady Tkachuk, Philip Zadina, who I know a lot of Canadians fans are hoping is available still at number 3. Evan Bouchard, Quinn Hughes, and Noah Dobson, all going to be there. The draft, of course, is on June 22nd and 23rd in Dallas. So we're a couple of weeks away, right? 3 weeks from now, we will be bringing you coverage here, I would imagine, on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio of the draft. So really things are heating up here as the Stanley Cup Final goes down. And I would imagine that those kids are going to be well dressed and do some sort of an awkward interview with Don Cherry, because that's what goes down, right? Every year, it's an annual tradition. So those kids, and I'm sure some others, are going to be there as they get ready for what would be, I would imagine at this point, sort of the biggest night, the biggest weekend of their respective lives. And it sounds like a pretty nice draft. And we're hearing more and more. And this is the thing now, right? We're hearing about the prospects for the next couple of years. Sounds like we've got a real good one next year.
Still no Jesse.
And not too shabby when it comes to the year after that as well, at least on the top end of the draft, although it's really hard to say at this point, right? And I'm not going to pretend that I'm some sort of an expert when it comes to the NHL draft. But a couple of things I wanted to get to here. We spoke about off the top of the show hockey culture, and I'm going to get to some of your replies on that in a moment. I just wanted to correct, I think that in the last hour, I'm not sure, but was that Gerard Gallant and not Barry Dross that we played? Anyway,
yes.
we heard from Gerard Gallant, head coach of the Vegas Golden Knights, and he seems pretty loose, and pardon the expression, but doesn't it feel like they're playing with house money there in Vegas? Right now, though, I wanted to bring this up since I talked about it off the top of the show, hockey culture, contrasting it, comparing it with what we see in the National Basketball Association and the way things are there, that we got a couple of replies. And I mentioned LeBron James's absurd outfit. If you haven't seen it, the LeBron showed up to Game 1 of the NBA Finals rocking a suit with shorts, no pants, but shorts. And everybody was talking about this. Now, one person, Mary Lise Dunphy, replied to me on Twitter and with a meme that says, and I'm not sure how true this is, but I will take this meme as gospel, because why the heck not? That LeBron's outfit cost more than $45,000. Now, to be fair here, the reason that the number is so high is because of his bag. He apparently has a $41,000 alligator bag in his hand. I have no idea what's in the bag, what he could be bringing. Other than that, his suit and tie, apparently about $2,600. His shirt, $330. The shorts, $940 shorts. That's an expensive pair of shorts. A $90 socks. Are you kidding me? $525 sunglasses and a $200 pair of headphones. Come on, you can do better than that, LeBron. $200 headphones for a grand total of almost $47,000. Now, I don't know how true that is, but you know what? I got no problem with it. You got that kind of money. You've been working as hard as LeBron James has for his entire life to cultivate that talent and monetize it. By all means, get yourself a $41,000 alligator bag so you can carry around whatever it is that you need to bring with you to Game 1 of the NBA Finals at Oracle Arena in Oakland. Some other people getting back to me on this hockey culture question. Red says Old Boys Club. Old Boys and Bigots, actually, is what Red said. Geez, Red, tell me how you really feel about that. Rob says, Rob down in Florida, replying to me saying, a hockey culture to me is what our country at times represents, referring to Canada. He says that when somebody mentions they are Canadian, you're automatically told, oh, you're a hockey fan. No other country has that stigma. That's what the word that Rob uses, but reputation is the word maybe that I'd use, attached to them the way that we do. It is a common thread that unites us at times. And Jeff replies, talking about hockey guys. He says, a great question. Old school guys would say a guy like Lou Lamoriello creates a hockey culture. But for me, today's players prefer the culture Gerard Gallant sets in Vegas, work hard, and have fun doing it. And maybe that's a little bit of what's going on here, because hockey does have the reputation for being what it is, and maybe a little bit more stuck up and stodgy than a lot of other sports are. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful or say mean things about hockey. I love hockey. I've devoted my professional life essentially to covering hockey. I love the sport. I just think that we could do a little bit better when it comes to the way that the sport is marketed and perceived, perhaps, especially in the United States. I mean, we got no problem here in Canada. You want to watch hockey highlights, go to TSN all night long. They got 5 channels, and they're pretty much all going to be running hockey highlights on a loop for roughly 10 hours or something like that. But if you're an American hockey fan, you know this. Sometimes if you're on the road, let's say, and you check into a hotel, there's a good chance that you will get limited access to highlights of the sport, just for example. And I'd love to see more of that. And if the demand is there, I'm sure that ESPN and other sports providers would be willing to provide it. But we got to get there first, and I think part of it is selling the game. Sell the game a little bit better than they do, and I think the key to doing that is personalities. Market those personalities. You've got some great personalities in the game. Did you see Connor McDavid in Paris for the French Open the last couple of days? A young man is off and about, enjoying his summer, traveling around Europe, and you're seeing a little bit of it on social media. He showed up on the broadcast. Now, I don't want to screw this up. I saw it on TSN anyway, the broadcast of the French Open, and he was cracking some jokes. He was talking a little bit about his ping pong game that he played against Canadian tennis star Denis Shapovalov. It was cool to see, especially from McDavid. If you're Canadian, you've probably seen that ad where Conor McDavid is standing there in a guy's office as he orders an Oilers onesie for his kid, and they have the kind of funny, awkward interaction. I think, he's got a personality, and I would love to see that shine through. And we are seeing it a little bit more, and I think we should encourage that type of thing. It just seems like anytime somebody does show a little bit of personality, we seem to sort of shy away from it, and I think that's a little bit of a shame. Speaking of personality, we've got some great ones on the ice tonight for Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. Jonathan Marchessault will be out there, and Alexander Ovechkin as well. Those, I think, are probably the 2 best personalities. I think a case to be made for Marc-Andre Fleury, who's one of the great personalities and one of the nice guys in the game. We've heard so much about that, and that's been a great story here over the course of it. But I wanted to go back in time, if we could, to a little bit earlier this week, Game 1 of the series, and the Tom Wilson hit on Jonathan Marchessault. You know the hit that I'm talking about. Even I'm sure the most ardent of Capitals fans would agree that the hit was late at the very least. And that's fine. Look, it's hockey. I understand. I think that maybe a 5-minute major for interference might have been warranted in that situation. But one thing, and it's a plea, it's something that I'd love to hear, and it is the I wasn't trying to hurt the guy thing. When it's crazy enough to hear that said, period, right? When one guy hits another guy and he says, I wasn't trying to hurt him. It's like, come on now. It's okay. Let's just admit it. That's what you're trying to do. There's nothing wrong with that. Come on, you're a hockey fan. You love big hits, especially clean big hits. But you're trying to tell me that Tom Wilson is not in that moment. And knowing his reputation, and I understand, none of us can put ourselves into Tom Wilson's head, but I think we can sort of look at Tom Wilson's track record. We can look at the things that he has done, even in these playoffs alone. We know that he was finally suspended, perhaps a little bit too late for the hit on Zach Aston Reese in that Pittsburgh series, but this is a guy who throws his weight around. And he's going and he's looking at Jonathan Marchessault, who outside of, I would argue anyway, outside of Marc-Andre Fleury, is not only a great personality, but has been Vegas's best player in the playoffs so far. And he sees him sort of wheel away from the puck. And sure, maybe you could argue he's watching his pass. You can't tell me that that wasn't an extraordinarily late hit. And I think Tom Wilson is trying to hurt the guy. Now, is he leaving his feet? No. Is he hitting him in the head? No. But he sees a player who's much smaller than him, and he sees an opportunity to potentially knock him out of the series. That Ovechkin is in some ways playing some of the best hockey of his career with Tom Wilson at his side. And he'll say, ask Alex Ovechkin what he thinks about Tom Wilson. All those guys, ask everybody in the room what they think about Tom Wilson. You take the bad with the good. And again, I don't know to single out Tom Wilson. I understand. I'm talking about this one thing. As Sean writes to me moments ago on Twitter, you're talking about the Wilson's hit ad nauseum when Vegas scored after that cross-check. No question. That was absolutely ridiculous. And that's another thing that we could get to here, as I am, in full disclosure, kind of winging it right now because we weren't able to contact the guests that we booked for 6:05 today. But that was absurd, but it's just the two things have nothing to do with each other. Now, I decided I was going to talk about Tom Wilson. Should Ryan Reeves have been given a penalty? Absolutely, he should have been given a penalty, and that should not have been a crucial goal in game one of the series. It was ridiculous. I mean, what were the referees doing? And in this new era, right? And you've seen it here with the officiating, and they'll take the opportunity now sometimes to sort of gather together and talk about something with presumably to get the call right. Right, you see the referees doing that. This is a relatively new phenomenon in hockey where the referees all get together, the officials all get together, and they sort of say, all right, what did you see? What happened there? What should we be calling in this situation? And what I don't understand is how, first of all, how you missed that call. And I don't think they missed it. Why you would decide to let that cross-check slide from Ryan Reeves, and maybe at the time not necessarily knowing that he's going to score a goal right after, which makes it that much worse. Because you have to remember this, and we always do sort of zone in on the stuff that happens in the lead up to a goal. But a lot of the time, these things happen all over the place, right? The reason we remember the Reeves cross-check is because he scored a goal right after, when really, had he not scored, this would probably be an afterthought at this point. And if I was talking about it, a lot of people would be like, "Oh, really? I don't even remember that from game one." But when a goal is scored right after, it's like when there's a turnover, right? Turnovers happen all the time, but if the turnover leads to a goal, it's a much bigger deal, and that player tends to sort of be singled out for it. Even if it's not necessarily his fault. You turn the puck over, and then hey, your goalie gives up a banana or a bad goal. You're going to be sort of blamed for that, whether it's fair or not. But Sean, believe me, I'm aware of the absurdity of missing that cross-check on Brian Reeves in game one. Anyway, game three is coming up tonight. Should be a lot of fun. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe Tom Wilson will do something crazy. Maybe Alex Ovechkin will rip a one-timer and score. Or maybe the Vegas Golden Knights will be explosive in transition and score a goal on an odd man rush. Maybe all of those things will happen. If I could bet on it, I probably would bet on all three of those things happening. Let's get the Capitals perspective next. Isabelle Khurshudyan is on the beat for the Washington Post covering the Capitals. She's been going back and forth between, Vegas and now back home in Washington where they're getting ready for the game. We'll have it for you live here, and we will tee it up from a Capitals perspective with Isabelle Khurshudyan. That's coming up next. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and hockeyprimetime.com. Capitals, who find themselves tied up at a game apiece with the expansion Vegas Golden Knights. So will it be the Golden Knights or will it be Alex Ovechkin? Seems like a win-win for us neutrals looking for stories, and a lot of fun so far this series. So the series shifts to Washington now. Home ice for the Capitals. Alex Ovechkin's home ice Stanley Cup playoff debut. With more on that, Isabelle Khurshudyan of the Washington Post. Hello, Isabelle.
Hey, Connor. How's it going?
I'm well, thanks, and thanks for making time for us here today. What's it like? How does Washington one up Vegas's pomp and pageantry in the lead up to games 1 and 2 of their series?
Oh, we've got Sting and Shaggy outside, I think.
Ooh.
No, I think Pat Sajak's doing like Wheel of Fortune style like lineup intros, which is probably not as cool as Michael Buffer, but I'm sure it'll be interesting. I mean, Sajak does come to games like during the regular season, so I think he counts as like an actual fan.
And so they clearly Ted Leonsis and the Capitals were like, all right, Vegas is doing this, like we got to do something, right?
I think the league like handles a lot of this stuff,
Huh.
like when it gets to the final. But I mean, yeah, I think, you shouldn't try to out Vegas in any case. Like it's just not going to happen. And what Vegas does like works for that market. Like I don't think this market would be as like receptive to that. I think it's awesome. Like their pregame with the night and everything. I think it's super fun. But yeah, I mean, let them have their thing, and you've got to kind of do your own thing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun tonight. Shaggy and Sting. Wow. Two guys I never thought I would ever see doing music anywhere near one another. All right. So Braden Holtby, a lot of talk has to be focused on the save, the crazy save. And I know that he was sort of typically hockey goalie humble about it, but that was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the context of the game, the time, the situation, I guess the significance of, that being their first Stanley Cup Finals win in franchise history. I mean, all of it's going to be pretty iconic. People are already like trying to rank it, like where does it fall in like individual DC sports like plays, and it's there's a pretty well consensus that it's in the top 5. So I think he's pretty tired of talking about it. He answered like 4 questions about yesterday and wasn't super enthusiastic about it, but it's definitely, I understand the excitement around it because it was incredible in the moment. I was sure they had scored.
And I think it's incredible, and we will remember it, but especially if they go on to win the series, right? Like that's what'll sort of cement it forever. But yeah, just a ridiculous save, and that's he's an NHL goaltender. If there's one thing I've learned from years of covering Carey Price here in Montreal, is that they do not like talking about themselves, they do not like talking about their saves, and they'd much rather just give credit to their teammates. But yeah, a crazy moment, and also taking into account, Isabelle, that Braden Holtby lost his job as recently as a couple of weeks ago. I mean, he's come such a long way this season, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has, and I think the way he's handled it all, really kind of a credit to him that he's, he never really got like all too down on himself, even when he did lose the starting job, and he kind of kept that quiet confidence, like, hey, I'm a good goaltender, and if things happen and I have to go back in there, then I'm going to stop the puck. I mean, that's exactly what he told Barry Trotz. Like, if you need me back in, I'll stop the puck.
Huh.
And he just kind of like, he was the same, which is, I think, important. He's such a routine guy, so kind of regimented that he didn't change anything when, he wasn't the starter anymore. He just kind of kept working, as hard as he always does, and kept the same attitude and was supportive. And I think that's what helped him when he got back in there. It wasn't that big of a deal in his mind.
So we've got a 1-1 series, and the game will get going a little after 8 o'clock tonight. We'll have live coverage of the national broadcast with Kenny Albert and company here on Sirius XM, NHL Network Radio. All the talk about Ovechkin, and naturally, this is what happens, is that when you have a superstar, that's who everybody zones in on. But speaking of long-suffering members of this team, Nicholas Backstrom has been around for almost as long as Alex Ovechkin has, and sort of flies under the radar a little bit, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, everybody kind of refers to him as underrated. He's called underrated so much I start to wonder if he's actually underrated anymore. But, to me, it's so impressive right now how he's playing with that kind of gnarly right index finger that's super swollen, and he was still continuing to be kind of an effective player. I thought that line was really good last game. Even when he moved up with Ovechkin and Wilson when Kuznetsov got hurt, that group was really good together too. And I haven't seen him this happy, this kind of outward emotionally happy. I could say the same about Ovi. You could tell those guys are enjoying it. They look, loose, even though they probably have the most pressure. And I think the rest of the team's kind of responding to that.
And so here we are, and the storylines. I mean, it's got to be fun too. And I know that Stanley Cup finals aren't all created equal, but this does, at least to me, from an outside perspective, from a neutral perspective, and I think the ratings have sort of backed this up. It's been pretty amazing. The stories and the feedback and the kind of attention and the scrutiny. People seem, I'd say, more engaged just on a sort of general sports fan level in this final than any final I can remember in recent memory. And I guess you got the star power, you've got the Vegas storyline as well, but no shortage of stuff to write about, is there?
Yeah, I think it's a good balance where you do have like kind of Vegas is a great sports story for for all of sports, not just for the NHL. So there's a certain allure about them. And then, Ovechkin is obviously a star who people kind of think about, he hasn't won yet, can't win the big one. Like, this is his kind of, man on a mission kind of Stanley Cup run storyline playing out too. And so both of those, I think, plus it's something different, I don't think anybody wanted to see, unless you're from Pittsburgh, that kind of gotten, people wanted to see something different than like Penguins win the Cup for a third time. It is, I think it's got a good, I can see what the storylines would be good. And plus the games have been fun. That first game was wild. 6-4, 10 goals, back and forth. The lead changed like 6 times or something like that. And then, even the last game had several plays and was, good action. So, I think it's been a good final so far, and I expect it to stay that way.
Yeah, you're right about that. It helps when the games are good, and that's definitely been the case so far. Especially Game 1 was amazing, especially if you don't have to write a game story about it. With Isabelle Khurshudyan covering the Capitals for the Washington Post, I'm Conor McKenna. You can follow Isabelle on Twitter at @Khurshudyan. That's KHURSHUDYAN. All right. So everybody's talking about Fortnite. We were talking to Corey Masisak in the last hour, and he said this is it's the Fortnite draft combine. He's in Buffalo for the combine, but the Caps and Knights are apparently both old school. They're playing Mario Kart. Is that right?
They are. Yeah, it's a tradition started by Nate Schmidt. Bought the Caps Nintendo 64 with their fine funds, and then when he got selected by the Golden Knights, he left the Nintendo 64. So when the Caps, go on their playoff run, they start taking it with them in the postseason. And then Schmidt did the same thing. He runs the fine fund in Vegas, so they go on Nintendo 64 for the Knights, and they're also playing Mario Kart on the off days. So good wholesome fun for these two teams.
And that's not the only thing that the teams are emulating from one another, right? The Jonathan Marchessault and the Vegas Golden Knights have apparently stolen the hot lap idea that we saw Barry Trotz do before Game 7 last round, and no animosity for the Knights stealing their hot lap idea on game days.
I don't know. If I were the Caps, I'd be pretty offended. He went pretty slow. It felt like kind of a mock hot lap. So I don't know. I mean, he did that after the Caps had skated. I'm sure they saw it. It was on social media. Sure, they saw the quotes. So we'll see. I would imagine they were none too pleased.
And the other story, the big one here, is Evgeny Kuznetsov, right? Do you have any kind of a sense? I guess, is it a game time decision?
Technically, but he's playing.
Yeah, okay.
I would expect him to play. He was a full participant skate.
Okay, well, that's good, because and one thing that I was going to ask you about is Lars Eller, who we've spoken about here before, Isabelle, but continues to sort of do it. And that was the one thing that I thought was, well, if Kuznetsov's going to miss a game, maybe Eller can do what he did when Nicholas Backstrom was out and sort of step up and be a hero. And you don't want him to keep doing that forever because probably end up taking a bunch of terrible penalties and maybe getting you into trouble. But over the short term, like he's had a crazy kind of awesome run here in the playoffs. What is it? 17 points in 21 games. It's been incredible.
Yeah, and he had a really good regular season, career year, 18 goals, 20 assists. So he's been good for them. I mean, that contract, $3.5 million per for 5 more years, is now looking really good because there's probably a team that'd be looking to get him as a second line center. So he stepped up last game, right? He 2 primary assists, 1 goal, and had a hand in all 3 of their goals. And but yeah, that's not sustainable. Where not just him playing, centering a second line. I think that's fine, but you wonder about the bottom 6, like how sustainable is Chandler Stevenson at third line center or whatever. It hurts the depth when you don't have a guy like Kuznetsov in there, especially when Backstrom is also still playing on kind of that, weird finger injury and isn't at 100%. So it's definitely good news that Kuznetsov's back in there, and he's been there. Backstrom said over and over he's been their best player in the playoffs, and I would agree with that.
Well, he's leading the scoring, right? That's a pretty good indication of that. I was kind of surprised to see that, but yeah, what a player, and obviously probably the most iconic goal of the playoff run so far there in the Pittsburgh series. Isabelle, thank you as usual for your time. Enjoy the game tonight, and tell Shaggy I said hi. Okay.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks for having me on.
There's Isabelle Khurshudyan, Shaggy, and Sting playing before game number 3 of the Stanley Cup final. That's some A-list stuff, eh? Who do you think would win in a fight between Sting and Shaggy? Non-hockey edition. I got Sting. Do some sort of weird tantric body manipulation thing, take out Shaggy. But I don't know. He's not a young man, that Shaggy. A lot of people don't know that, but the guy's been around for a while. Even before It Wasn't Me, which was his big hit back in the day. The guy had been around for a bit. He's 49 years old. What's your favorite Shaggy song? Oh Carolina? Boombastic? Angel? So many to choose from. I don't know. I have a feeling I might be doing a little bit of a Shaggy mix down myself before puck drops at about 8 o'clock tonight. Anyway, coming up next here, let's talk to Alex Prewitt. Alex on the National Hockey League for Sports Illustrated, and always fun to check in with him. He's got a number of very interesting things going on, some great features that I want to ask him about. So we will check in with Alex Prewitt of Sports Illustrated. That's coming up next here, Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. except for the black flies and whatnot. But yeah, go on up to Lake Winnipeg and enjoy it. That's why you put up with those minus 40 days, right? Those terrible, terrible winter days where you're just like, what am I doing? Why did my family, of all the places my family could have settled, why did they settle here? Anyway, it is a beautiful day, and I hope you're enjoying it wherever you are. We've got a great game. It should be a great game coming up tonight. You can listen to the national call here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. It is Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. With more on that and to go around the storylines in the National Hockey League, pleasure to welcome back to the show Alex Prewitt from Sports Illustrated on the National Hockey League and the world of hockey at large. Alex, how you doing, man?
Well, it's raining and like 6,000% humidity here in DC. So,
oh, I'm sorry. But yeah, we had we actually just had that break yesterday, and so we'll see. Maybe that'll happen for you guys. A lot was made of the effect that the weather was having on the ice in Vegas. It's going to be interesting to see if anything happens in Washington. I wanted to ask you about a couple of the things that you've been writing about recently at Sports Illustrated, including your George McPhee piece. It's kind of amazing, isn't it, that 59-year-old George McPhee has his fingerprints all over both teams here in the Stanley Cup Final. Kind of an unusual or maybe even almost unique situation, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean everything about this Vegas team is totally unique, but it starts from the top, right? Only 2 GMs all time, I think, have taken a team to the Stanley Cup Final in their first year with them twice, and that would be Bob Clark, who ironically enough George actually sat down with for a couple hours to get advice on the expansion process. Did the same thing with Doug Riseborough. So it's him and George McPhee, and that's it. And I mean, yeah, it's a real testament, I think, to the work George did in Washington that they're here. And that's not to take anything away from Brian McClellan, who certainly, I think, provided the finishing kick that they needed to get over that hump that had kind of plagued them for so long. But you go to, I think it was in Game 7 against Tampa Bay, 10 of their 20 skaters were picked under the McPhee regime between George and Director of Amateur Scouting Ross Mahoney, who's still here. So, yeah, I mean, all the way down to, some of the in-house front office personnel he took from Washington to Vegas. Their cap guy, his longtime executive assistant, the goalie coach Dave Pryor. They come from here too. So yeah, certainly their fingerprints all over this one.
And to what extent do you think his reputation's been rehabilitated by this happening here? Because there was a time, and I don't know how fair it is, but what a lot of people will think of, at least before he was the architect of Vegas, was George McPhee. He traded Philip Forsberg for Martin Erad, right? It's amazing
Sure.
the extent to which his reputation is just completely done a 180, hasn't it, in the last year or so?
Well, the fact that was the first thing you mentioned when you talk about George McPhee says that, and you're not the only one by any stretch, that's always going to be part of it, I believe. I think people are always going to look at the end of his tenure here in Washington in that regard, through that lens. And also, at what happened under Adam Oates, it was pretty well chronicled how bad things were, how dysfunctional things were when Brian McClellan stepped in and Barry Trotz took over as head coach. So, I'm sure there's a little bit of bitterness. It's hard to feel bitter when, you're the team on the other side playing them, and maybe worse if, Vegas was in it and Washington wasn't. But that said, if you look at the total body of work that he had, I mean, he comes in, he takes the team to the Cup Final in the first year with a couple pretty savvy trades. And then he has to do a very tough thing, which is not only to tear it down, but to build it back up in the cap era. And, getting Ovechkin help, but, some of those low first round picks like Burakovsky, Carlson, et cetera, Johansson, Kuznetsov, on and on, guys in these 20s that, they were able to nab and have become pretty stable pieces for them. So,
yeah, no kidding. How about Nate Schmidt? There's another one for you, and a guy that he's picked up twice. And I wonder about the margins. Like Vegas, he's such an important player, Schmidt, for them. And also the Capitals, I think, would be so much better if they had Nate Schmidt. Just sort of an amazing thing, and it really just continues to sort of amaze me that this is continuing, and we'll have Game 3 for you tonight. We'll see what happens and what the latest storyline is going to be coming out of this. And you had a chance, and I know I read your piece at SI.com under the NHL header that George McPhee is like celebrity status in Las Vegas, right? In a restaurant, this guy walks in and people start cheering.
Yeah, it was the restaurant at the rink, so there's that caveat that they obviously know who he is. But yeah, I mean, he walked in and people started applauding and standing and shaking his hand, and Actually, the NHL Network for some reason wasn't on in the restaurant. So George walks in, he immediately asked someone to change it to NHL Network because he wants to have hockey on and at the rink. And it just so happened that they were replaying Game 5 against Winnipeg when they clinched. So he had the chance to, he was kind of watching that throughout the time we were having lunch together. And at periodic moments, people would start clapping. And I think there was one point where they showed him at the end, and he's, hugging Kelly McCrimmon, his assistant GM in the box, and, people start cheering. And, a couple, it's not like raucous applause and like standing ovations here, but enough that way more than you would expect from a GM. Let's put it that way.
And as always, and you can read more at si.com on George McPhee and the other stuff that Alex has worked on lately, including your and it's been a while, I know, but we haven't had you on for a while. Your Enter the Sin Bin piece, and talking about the penalty box and its sort of place in playoff lore. I guess the most recent thing, and I'm forgetting, but it was Tom Wilson. Oh, right. It was in Game 7 against Tampa, him and Braden Coburn, right? the full 2-minute stew before the two of them burst out and started throwing haymakers at each other. But it's amazing, right? As you wrote, they're all different, but they're all kind of the same too in all these rinks, aren't they?
Yeah, this was. I mean, look, I didn't really grow up a hockey fan, so I kind of have this like weird fascination maybe with random small things about the sport. I think the penalty box is the funniest thing in maybe all of sports. Just the fact that like when you commit an infraction, you get put in timeout, and then there's a guy there who has a watch, and he tells you when it's time to leave. And there's like a freezer of pucks in there, and then there's like tape, and then there's guys in the middle, and like these guys have to sit there while these like really angry people come in there, and have to sit very patiently until they put them under latch and key. This is not like in lacrosse, they have a penalty box, but it's like open air. You just go, it's like a chalk square. This, they like lock you in there, but at the same time, you're barricaded by glass and like fans are pressed up against it. And there's cracks in the glass, so you can hear what they're saying and you could talk back to them. And, every so often someone will, squirt water over, or in the Ty Domi incident, climb over and try to get in there. So, I don't know what they expected to happen when they invented the thing, but this thing's pretty ripe for comedy. And, as I got into the piece, and, importance too, if you're in there in the playoffs, it's probably a really bad thing. And, it goes all the way down to Danny Probert, Bob Probert's wife, spreading his ashes there in the Joe, because that was where he spent a lot of his time.
It's amazing. And you're right. It's funny to hear you say that, because it's one of those things, and I'm sure a lot of the people listening can relate to this. That was just, I've been watching hockey since I was a kid, so the penalty box to me is just as natural as can be. But then to hear the way that you describe it, you're right. It is actually hilarious and kind of ridiculous the way that it goes down. And you're right. And in some ways, unique in the world of sports. A little timeout for an adult, and often for doing something really crazy, like, hey, you're not allowed to swing that like heavy wooden stick and whack that other guy in the head with it. You go to timeout for 2 minutes. So, and you said you didn't grow up a hockey fan, so I'm curious, how did you get into hockey and end up where you are today, writing about it for Sports Illustrated?
Transparently, my boss at the Washington Post said, "You cover hockey now." I said, "Okay."
Oh, there you go.
That was like 4 or 5 years ago. That's most of what. It's like 98% of what I do. So.
And as you wrote also, and there hasn't always been a penalty box. Actually, it's the 102-year anniversary of penalty boxes, because until 1916, when you did something bad, you were fined for it. Like as you write, like speeding tickets, right?
Yeah, Yeah, they would almost have to take out a pad and like cite you on the ice and use their old numbers to pencil to write down. But you're totally right about. Things they're doing things that wouldn't be kosher. I mean, there's no wonder that it's called the sin bin, because if you did any of that stuff out in the real world, you'd be actually going to real prison.
Right. Yeah, cross-check somebody in the face, that is assault. Perhaps not with a deadly weapon, but geez, you get the right prosecutor, could go to jail for a long, long time. All right,
there you go.
With Alex Prewitt of Sports Illustrated here on Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is your Jeff Vinnick piece, writing about the market there in Tampa and making it work in the quote-unquote non-traditional hockey market. What did you learn from talking to the owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning about making it work in that market?
He and no one else there is particularly shy about saying the state of things when they took over. When Len Barry and Oren Koulis sold the team, maybe that's disputed by the other side in terms of exactly how bad of shape things were in. But they talk about the arena not being totally up to snuff, and prospects were slowly trickling in, and but clearly nowhere near what it is today. And then just the fan base, attendance, et cetera. You see it in other markets as well. It's it takes time to build it, and especially in the non-traditional markets, it ebbs and flows in terms of revenue, in terms of fans. So they were at the bottom, or at least comparatively compared to now, when they're perennial whatever conference finalists, class of the East annually. So I mean, he takes it over, and I think quite honestly, he hired the right people. He's a very hands-off owner in that regard. He attends games. He doesn't really say much during the game. He has like a very strict rule in his press box, or his luxury boxes. You can't talk during the games, and I think he just kind of enjoys watching it. So other than that, it's that, and that's an attitude that kind of spreads throughout the organization, right? He doesn't really meddle with the affairs of Steve Yzerman, and consequently, Steve doesn't really meddle in the affairs of John Cooper in terms of like lineup decisions and day-to-day stuff. So I think it's a culture thing that they built there, and you go down there at any point during the playoffs or even during the regular season. I mean, the house is packed. The energy is crackling, and certainly one of the better fan bases out there. And I do think it's probably a testament to the movement, that the Sun Belt movement, that if Tampa wins that Game 7, we have the first all Sun Belt final between Vegas and Tampa. So they're close, but they're pretty clearly set up for the long haul here with some of the prospects and that they have in the system, and some of the young guys they had coming in like Sorelli and Gord this year, and Braden Point, his emergence, and Yzerman's done a really good job of managing the cap, and that's what you need to do in this era in order to have sustained success, I guess.
And they've got some nice prospects coming up there as well. All right, so listen, Alex, a pleasure as always to chat with you. Big fan of your work, and I hope we can chat with you again soon.
Thank you. Take care.
There's Alex Prewitt, sportsillustrated.com, SI.com, I should say, but writing for Sports Illustrated. And that interview I'm referring to between Alex and Jeff Finnick, the owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning. I love this little tidbit, right? Imagine, because this is the dream, right? Like owning your own hockey team on some level, this is everybody's dream. Must be so fun to be super, super rich and be able to do something like this. And listen to what he said to Alex. He said, he was asked, were you looking at buying any other teams besides the Lightning? He's a Boston guy. So he says, the Bruins weren't for sale. They weren't going to be going up for sale. So I looked at Dallas, Phoenix, Florida, Atlanta before they moved to Winnipeg. Remember, this was all the way back in 2010. He looked at Nashville, New Jersey, the Islanders, Columbus, Carolina. He was evaluating all of them. And he says, one of the big factors was, where do you want to live? And he says, Florida is a great place to live. What a life, eh? You're not only are you sort of picking and choosing which NHL team you might buy, you choose the team, the hockey team you're going to buy based on where you want to live. That, my friend, is living. Coming up next, we'll wrap things up here. Is the home cup final debut for Alexander Ovechkin, and a win neutral, a great story lore. We'll explore that and wrap things up next. This is Hockey Primetime on XM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. having a reservation? Maybe you're listening to the show on our podcast page at hockeyprimetime.com. If that is the case, then, well, thanks for checking out our website. So feel free to listen to old episodes, old interviews of the show, all there at hockeyprimetime.com. This is Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. Coming up next here on the channel, we will be bringing you a live pregame show from Verizon Center with Rob Simpson and Zig Fracassi. It's here on NHL Network Radio. If you want to listen to the game, you can listen to it here. It's the national call, the sort of the neutral call with Kenny Albert here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. If you want the Capitals call with John Walton on Caps 24/7, the Washington Capitals radio network, you can find that on Sirius XM 167. And the Vegas call is available to you at XM 219 and Sirius 217. Tonight, it's the home cup final debut for Alexander Ovechkin, one of the great personalities in hockey. And that's the one storyline, the one dominant storyline, and he's been performing as he always has often been sort of unfairly tabbed as a guy who doesn't step up in the playoffs, when in truth he's been fantastic. And it very seldom has been anything to do with him, at least it seems to me, when the Capitals fall short in the playoffs. But that's what happens when you're the star player, when you're the captain. You do become sort of the face of that failure in some ways, whether it's fair or not. But it's going to be great to see. It's the first ever home Stanley Cup final game in Alex Ovechkin's fantastic career, this great goal scorer that we've all been so lucky to watch. And I didn't know, I wasn't sure who, and this is, I don't know how many of you are kind of like this when you're watching sports, that I'm the kind of fan who I always am cheering for one of the teams that I'm watching. Not like jumping up and down, but for some reason, and it's just in me, that if I'm watching a football game, like I could be watching the Browns and the Ravens, two teams that I don't care about, but I will be in some way pulling for one of the teams to win. And it's the same way here. And I didn't know what was going to happen in the Stanley Cup final. Which team was I going to be cheering for? I don't know. And I had to wait. I didn't know until the game started. And then I'm watching the game and I find myself cheering for Vegas. And I guess it's because the story is so amazing. And you do wonder, how are we going to remember this, right? This is going to be a massive game here tonight. And right now, one of two things is going to happen. I think that if the Caps go on and win this series, we're going to look back on the save. That's what it's called now. It's the save that Braden Holtby made in the late stages of the third period of game number 2. And what's happened here in the Stanley Cup final? You think about it, going in, Marc-Andre Fleury was the guy. He was the Conn Smythe front runner. He's got 2 championship rings. I think actually 3 championship rings, but he was the starter for one of them. But it was really Braden Holtby who's stolen the show. Fleury wasn't very good in game 1. He wasn't that great in game number 2. But he stole the show. 37 saves in game 2.
40.
And that's what he's been like his whole career. He's been one of the best money goaltenders, which is crazy to say about a guy who's on a team that's disappointed so often. Oh, here we go. We will turn it over briefly and to Rob Simpson and Zig Fracassi to pregame coverage of game number 3 from Verizon Center. No word yet if those guys are going to be able to land Shaggy as a special guest. Rob Conway, thank you for your hard work. Laura Saba is the producer of the show. Our executive producer is Sam Wu. I'm Conor McKenna. I'm off next week. I'll be back with you 2 weeks from now. Enjoy the game tonight.